Everybody, hey, how are you? This is Ryan. I am coming to you from day whatever it is now of quarantine from my new home office, my living room. There's a lot of hysteria and just really a lot of confusion out there on the news headlines and all of that of what's exactly going on with all this virus. Why is it that we're stuck in our homes and we're locked down? And I look outside and it looks pretty normal, right? And then you turn on the television and one channel will have you believing that the plague is about. The other channels will have you believing that this is all of a hoax, and then you look online and Hollywood celebrities are behind this whole thing, pushing the virus and holding vaccines back. So right now, I've got on the phone a friend of mine, a researcher. He researches viruses, deadly viruses too, up at the Mayo Clinic. He and I have talked about this whole coronavirus stuff for quite a while. And so since everyone's stuck at home, we thought we would take 10, 15, 20 minutes and just kind of talk about the science behind what's going on, try to eliminate as much hysteria and confusion behind this, and get some idea of what's going on and what we should expect going forward. So, Doctor, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I am. Thank you, World, for having me.
Yes.
As Ryan mentioned, I'm Ryan Donahue. I'm a researcher at Mayo Clinic. My lab is under the lab of Dr. Catania, and we mainly study measles virus. But given the situation, we have recently decided to switch to studying more about the coronavirus, or as the virologists call it, SARS-CoV-2. So the coronavirus is actually a family of viruses, which includes other deadly viruses, as you know, SARS and MERS, which had outbreaks in the early 2000s and in the mid 2010s. And so this is just another virus from that family. And because we study measles, it's actually more similar than you think to these coronaviruses. So our research is pretty translatable. And so we decided that the world needs us focused on this now. So we're transitioning our lab to studying that right now.
So what's that transition look like? You guys obviously have all the hardware and all the brains up at the research, but what's that going to be? Is it just all internal? What type of global collaboration are you expecting on this?
Yeah, so, it's because we are practicing social distancing, and I've decided to self-quarantine myself because I've been traveling internationally. We are broken up into little pieces in our respective homes, so we're communicating by phone and Zoom and all these other connections. So it's mainly we're just getting started with that. So we haven't acquired any samples yet, but the idea is that being at the Mayo Clinic, and Mayo Clinic being the major hospital in Southwest Minnesota, they are getting COVID patients, and they're screening. They have the capability of screening up to 4,000 cases a day, or 4,000 individuals a day, and so they're getting a number of COVID positive patients. And our hope is that we can acquire some of these some samples from these COVID positive patients and look at how the virus is what the sequence of the virus is actually. And this can kind of give us an idea of why the virus is so deadly, and why certain patients may come down with stronger symptoms than others. And so if we can look at those COVID positive patients that are perhaps in the ICU and have a strong disease manifestation, and compare that to patients that have tested positive for the virus but have very little to no symptoms, like for instance maybe a family member which had a test but didn't really have many symptoms, we can look at the sequence or the genetics of the virus to see if there are any differences, and if there are, we can go after and further try to figure out if this is the potential reason for difference in the disease manifestation. And so we are at Mayo, the virology, I'm part of the virology departments, and there are, 50, 70 of us or so on the floor. And normally we all have our respective viruses that we work on, but in a circumstance like this, we've all kind of joined together and decided that we, all work together and try to, see what we can do to, save lives, I guess. And so, in collaboration with other labs on our floor, and we have reached out to other labs across the world, some other labs that have studied the coronavirus family for many, many years, which are the true experts. We need their help too, and so we've reached out to them. They've all been very supportive for that, although very busy as well. And so, so that's kind of what our lab is doing. Other labs are looking at trying to develop vaccines as well. So, it's a big effort, and we're just getting that ramped up now. We haven't actually acquired any patient samples yet, so we're putting in all the protocols, and there's some hoops to go through in order to do that. And these are all being fast tracked given the situation, but it still does take a little bit of time. So I think April 1st is when we'll hopefully start getting those patient samples.
Well, now, do you think this is part of the conversation, the hysteria. Do you think that the reaction so far is underreacting, correct amount of reaction, or overreaction, considering the shutting down bars and restaurants nationwide, shutting down transportation, all these other type of non-essential things? Do you think we're where do you sit on that?
I mean, I think the reaction, we need to have a strong reaction in order to have the results. You can't really half-ass it. I think you need to, take full action and be diligent about it. I do think that the concept of social distancing is a good one to, as I'm sure all of you heard, flatten the curve. And so this concept is basically delaying the outbreak spread in particular communities, and this will help alleviate the burden of hospitals, ICU beds, ventilator usage, protective equipment, and ultimately the ends number should be of positive cases should be less. Mm-hmm. And so I understand there's economic consequences to this, but we're talking about saving many lives, and it can get a lot. It probably will get worse before it gets better. Now that said, I don't think there's any need to panic for and I tried my best not to go crazy reading the media and listening to a ton of news articles, because the goal of the media is to capture your attention, and the best way to do that is to cause hysteria. So they probably are being a little bit over dramatic about it. But if you look at places like the CDC, CDC.gov, the World Health Organization, and other reputable sources, I think they're quite dead on with the seriousness of this. I do think practicing social distance is a good thing. And the way to do that is to shut down restaurants and concerts and things that places where people can gather in groups.
So it showed that there was in Hong Kong, they had done this. They had a very swift action from the top down. They defeated the virus very quickly. And then I believe it was just yesterday, a report says that it's popped back up and it's spreading again. So then does that mean that we should be, from where you're standing, would you say that Hong Kong and maybe the U.S. should be on lockdown for indefinitely until a vaccine is made? Or because I guess, the big question is, at what cost do we fight the virus?
Yeah, I know that is a difficult thing, and I think we all suspected that could be the case, that there could be a second wave. Once those the initial outbreak is controlled, there's and things start reopening again. If there are individuals that are flying in or flying out again, you could start a second outbreak. So that's a tough one to answer. I think it's possible that the spread of the virus is going to kind of be inevitable, but again, if you slow it down, it's going to help with again alleviating the burden on the hospitals and give us enough time to develop not necessarily a vaccine, because that's still at least a year away, even if we can even develop one. But antiviral therapies, they could come very quickly. There's some pilot studies using blood transfusions right now. It's kind of an old technique, but the FDA has fast-tracked usage of some old techniques to possibly cure some patients that are in the most dire of situations. And so, maybe delaying it enough for something like that could be beneficial. But again, it's hard to say. And I'm not an epidemiologist or public health expert, so I don't know the ultimate consequences of this. But I think for the time being, it's important to maintain this social distance. For how long, I can't answer that.
Right. Now, have you seen, I'm trying to find it as we're talking right now. I had it up, but you know how computers go. Have you seen about this new, it's a combination of an anti-malarial pill stacked with a Z-Pack. Have you seen this? And
I did hear the president mention that. I honestly have not researched anything about that, so I can't really speak about that. Again, I probably wouldn't have a confident judgment on that until I see hard data on whether or not it works. I think it's probably, trying anything and everything, at least in a systematic, safe way, is important. But until it's clear that this is beneficial, I probably wouldn't support it at the time. So, but again, I don't have too much information about that. I did hear a few things, but I haven't followed up on it.
Yeah, I'm going to see if I can find it here in just a moment. It was initially found in, here we go. Let me pull this up. Now, this isn't from Trump directly, but for those of you watching at home, this is some guy. It says here, and first, this came from France. It was first discovered in France. This guy tweets here, a New York doctor shared with Hannity his hydroxychloroquine, basically this pill stacked with Z-Pack results. He puts 200 milligrams twice daily, 500 milligrams once daily, 220 of zinc sulfate once. 350 patients, breathing restored in 3 to 4 hours, 0 deaths, 0 hospitalizations, 0 intubations. So it looks like they may have found not necessarily a vaccine, but at least a some type of cure. So now there's all these other comparisons, Ryan, to the past, like the swine flu, which took out millions of people in America with very little hysteria. Some of the older flus. In fact, I talked with a gentleman yesterday who's, he's almost in the boomer generation, and he was talking about back many years ago there was a huge pandemic when he was just a child. So this was like somewhere around the 50s. I forget exactly, like 57, I think he said. And he said they didn't cancel the World Series because he remembers watching the World Series. He caught it and not a big deal. Do you think, is this virus really that much more deadly? Because I think it's clear, nobody would argue that the infection rate spreads far faster, but it does seem like, here in America, I think we have, do you know how many deaths we've totaled in America now?
Let me bring that up. I have that tab up right now.
I thought I had it. I know that the confirmed cases right now is 50,000 cases in America.
We have, looks like if this is up to date, we have 55,000 cases and 809 deaths. That number changes very quickly. So, but yeah, I mean, the mortality rate is, quite high compared to flu. Influenza is the virus that causes that, which, it can, the mortality rate is less than 1%, and the mortality rate of this new coronavirus is, 2% to even 5% in some cases. It is stratified by age, which means that those patients that are older have a higher mortality rate than those that are younger.
Right.
And so, you're really, it's detrimental to the older population, certainly, much higher than, 2 to 5% even in cases. And so the fear is that, I think in general, we don't want, if we can help it, we don't want more viruses, deadly viruses spreading around the world. And so we're in a position right now where we can take, we have data that come out really fast, and we can take public health measures to help prevent this. And so why not do that?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's projections that the death rates will or a number of deaths, at least per capita, will in the U.S. can be very significant. In the flu epidemics, we live with those and everything. Take measures against that, maybe social distancing, maybe not to the extreme level we are now, but we should be practicing that in some sense. Or at least washing your hands, covering your cough.
For sure.
Staying home when you're sick, those types of things. This is also going to prevent flu spread and everything too.
Yeah, and I'm looking here actually as we're talking. It says, this is a Bloomberg article from a few days ago that says, Italy doctors have reported, it says here, 99% of those who died from the virus had other illnesses.
Yeah.
So again, it makes people wonder, are we overreacting? But if you're already compromised, then absolutely social distance yourself.
Yeah.
And so
you don't want to spread it. That's the other thing too, is like, you or I who are in our 30s, we might contract the virus. We may have little to no symptoms, but we walk around and we go to the grocery store and we walk past or touch the same thing as, a 70-year-old, individual who then does contract the virus from you. They get sick, they die. This is kind of the idea of that kind of herd mentality of everyone together needs to do their part to keep the spread low. It's the same thing with the concept of vaccines. And so, mainly before this studied measles virus. We have a great vaccine for measles. It works as long as you take it. It works very well. There are individuals who decide not to take it, and they may not die from it, but they might spread it to others who may die from it. And so as long as you have a large enough number of people who are vaccinated, then you can contain the virus. The less you have, the more the virus will spread, basically. And in a way, we are practicing a type of vaccine, if you will, by staying home. Preventing ourselves from being infected and spreading it, I guess.
Okay, and so from where you're coming from, when you're looking at this data, you think this is kind of a fair reaction? It could be that deadly that it's not just being overblown like a lot of people, because this is one of the most confusing things is that immediately this has become a political thing, the left versus the right, where the left seems to be saying shut it all down, and the right seems to be saying, oh, this is nothing more than just a seasonal, flu. But it sounds like you're leaning a little more towards this is more than just a flu.
Yeah, and I try to, leave my politics out and just look at the research and look at what the scientific community is talking about and what data they presented and everything. And to me, it seems like these kinds of measures are important to take right now.
Now, does it concern you that, like I was listening to the radio on this morning, does it concern you that places like Mexico really haven't done anything to curb this virus spread? Even with that said, they really don't have that many cases spreading or new cases or deaths, which seems strange because you would think the opposite would be true. But again, what do we as a country, if we're trying to protect our whole country, what good does it do if the whole southern border neighbor to the south isn't doing much at all?
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, they probably should be practicing similar measures as we are too. Regards to the number of cases, this is number of cases reported, so I'm not sure how extensive they're testing.
Yeah.
Maybe they are, maybe they're not. I just don't know. But I would be cautious that they probably have more cases than are actually being reported. The other thing is too, I think in the U.S., because there is so much global traffic in and out, that we're a unique situation where we're more susceptible to that sort of thing than other countries too. But they probably should be practicing those types of measures too. Because, like I said, it's kind of like you need everyone to to do this together.
Yeah, the governor of Florida this morning suggested that anybody who flies into Florida from out of the country should be put in a 14-day quarantine. I guess they're getting pretty serious. It seems to be really breaking out down in Florida. Being in the world of science, you're trying to really speed this up and figure out some solutions. Again, there's a lot of political back and forth about how the government is and the administration is working to make this easier. Do you find that they're doing a decent job of making this easier for you all to communicate, to research, to get trials, to get experiments, all of this? Do you find that they're making it worse? Do you have any opinion on the response and the action by the government right now?
Yeah, I mean, speaking, just about our particular situation and our lab and everything, we haven't really needed to rely on the federal government just yet in order to expedite these, our research. We probably will, and we certainly will. We're going to need grants to fund this research through probably the National Institutes of Health, which has had, this package that Trump approved for, I can't remember, was it $30 billion or something like that? It's at least a month ago or so, but a portion of that is going towards coronavirus research, and so we will benefit from that, I'm sure. But institutionally, the things have been expedited within our Mayo Clinic, but I don't think it has anything to do with the White House administration or anything.
Okay.
I think that I think the measures that are taken are probably going to be helpful for us for sure.
Okay, cool. Now this actually just popped in my mind a moment ago. I forgot to ask you. You were talking about testing and the results of testing. One of the things that people keep saying in America is we need more testing, we need more testing. But from what I understand at the moment, very few people in medical centers or whatever in America will give you a test unless you're showing clear symptoms or something along those lines. Do you suppose if we had the correct tests and we had an abundance of them, that the cases in America would go from, say, 50,000 to maybe even 1 million? What if 1 million of us have coronavirus right now? I mean, what if 5 million of us? It's possible. It's an infection. It could spread that quickly. You saw the videos probably of all the kids in college going on spring break and all of that.
Yeah.
So then that could...
The mortality rate, you mean?
Yes, the mortality rate.
Yeah.
Now, with that in mind, what's your take on? Well, given we're making these decisions on the information we have. However, we also don't really actually have the resources to properly test to see just how many people are actually catching this, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I mean, it's possible, and probably that number will come down when we realize that there are plenty of individuals out there that are asymptomatic, in particular children. I don't think there's been hardly any deaths or any serious cases with children, and even into their 30s, there definitely have been more cases into your 20s and 30s, but it really goes up as you increase in age. But I think, if we can find a way to make that test available to more than people who are just showing symptoms. There's talks about these in-home testing kits that they're designing now. I'm not sure where exactly that stands, but yeah. I mean, if it turns out that there is a million of us out there that test positive for it, then that's great that we know that. It's great for those individuals to know that they should be staying home for sure. And then that will hopefully flatten that curve even more. And so I was actually tested 2 days ago for COVID, and so I traveled internationally, and I've had a little bit of a cough and shortness of breath, and so I called the Mayo Clinic hotline and I told them those symptoms. Me and my girlfriend did, and they said, come on and get tested. And so we went in and got tested, and Mayo Clinic, again, they test up to 4,000. We're very fortunate that they have plenty of tests for us here. So we went to the drive-through and everything. We got a nasopharynx swab, which, by the way, was quite painful, but it happens. And so,
okay.
And they did the test, and we came out negative. So now I know that, I'm negative, so now I know I'm not spreading the virus. So if I need to leave the house for any reason, at least I know that I'm not positive. I just don't need to worry about, potentially contracting it and everything too. But this is very beneficial information, and if that was accessible to everyone, I think it's good. You're right; those mortality rates might drop, but the fact still remains that there's this circulating virus that's killing a lot of elderly people. And worldwide, we're at 20,000 deaths, and this has only been around for 2 months or so.
Okay. Well, I think they said they first discovered it like in November is when China first saw, but the last 2 months it's really spread outside of China, at least.
Officially, I think it's December, but it's probably likely that it was circulating before that. So, that's what we have to work with right now.
Okay, and what do you see? So we'll kind of wrap this up here on this point. I mean, two questions. First, do you see any credence to any legitimacy to any of the hysteria or any of the skepticism, the conspiracy types who are saying that it's overblown, or that there are people who have agendas to push, or that do you find anybody that has skepticism that you actually agree with so far in all of this?
I'm a scientist, and so for me to believe something, I need to see data for it. And so if I hear on a news article they make a particular claim, I'm going to be skeptical of that until I research that claim. So I tend not to even read much of news articles that don't have their sources cited in them. And so that's an important thing for us in the scientific field, and everyone really, is to know where those sources come from. So I'm not going to really believe much until I see data for it, or there's like a solid consensus from the scientific community about that.
Yeah, so absolutely.
There's a lot of circulating, falsehoods out there, and it's your job as a citizen of the world to screen those carefully, and trust those who are the experts, and take with a grain of salt those who are looking for likes or reposts.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking just for, like you said earlier, just to get attention.
Right.
Now, the last question I had, some of the side effects. Have you read about what's going on as far as how this virus is causing a lot of side effects as far as like lung shortness of breath, lung fluid buildup, scarring, all of that kind of thing?
Yeah. What's
that all about?
Yeah, I think so as far as how the virus is, you're spreading it. It's can be spread by cough, or it's air, in the air and everything, airborne, or touching a surface and then touching your hand, your mouth, your eyes, whatever. So the virus will then sort of get in. The number of viral particles is still unknown, but what we think is that the number of viral particles is much, much less than, let's say, SARS. And we know molecularly, looking at the actual proteins on comparing the original SARS virus to this new virus, that the ability for it to grab a hold of our cells is a lot stronger with this new virus than it was with the original SARS. And so in that way, you probably need less viral particles in order to kind of contract that infection.
Okay.
And so, so that's another avenue of research that our lab is looking at too. That's called the spike protein. Actually, is the part of the virus that attaches to your cell. It's kind of like a key, and then on the cell is like a little lock, and the virus needs to get in order for it to work and cause the disease. In order to get in, the key has to fit that lock perfectly.
Yeah.
And so this key is really, really well, it fits very, very well into the lock on certain cells that are in your lungs. It's called the spike protein, and that's if you've ever seen a picture of the viral particles, it looks kind of like a crown, and that's where it gets its name. Corona means crown, and so that's where the family coronavirus gets its name. It's from the spike protein. But anyway, so this virus will kind of get into your upper lungs and start causing cells to die and everything, and an immune response will start, and those infected cells will run into lungs deeper and deeper, and you sort of get from this upper respiratory infection to a lower respiratory infection, and you get again, all this mucus is from your immune system trying to react to it and everything, and so that's where you get that real deep shortness of breath and cough, and eventually if things go poorly, need for assistance breathing and everything. And from what I've read, it sounds like those, and we'll have to do a lot of long-term studies. Obviously, we haven't done any long-term studies. We don't have enough time, but that near 30% of your lung capacity has not recovered from patients who have theoretically cleared the virus.
Yeah.
And so there could be long-term effects from this, certainly. I think there's some heart issues in particular individuals too. Again, it's going to take time to really do long-term studies to figure out the overall what happened to those patients who recovered. For instance, are they having major problems still, 1-2 years out, or for life?
Okay. Well, anything as we wrap this up? I mean, I could go on for a while. Is there anything else you want to that was on your mind, or anything else important that you're not seeing that you wish was more known?
No, I think, like I said, you've all heard it a million times, but wash your hands diligently, cleaning those highly used surfaces, covering your cough with your elbow, staying home when you're sick, and social distancing. These are the major things that each of us can do in order to help keep this outbreak at a minimum. Okay. Again, it's probably going to get a little bit worse before it gets better, and we don't have all the answers now, but scientists like us are kind of doing our best to try to save lives. And again, I'm a molecular virologist, and so there's public health officials, politicians, even people on the economic side that all need to work together as well. And so I think we'll get through this, but we still got a little ways to go.
When you say you think it's going to get worse before it gets better, I kind of agree with you. Do you have any predictions or anything you've seen that you think are legitimate as to maybe on a timeline or even in numbers about how much worse?
Yeah, I don't actually want to speculate on that because I don't feel that I have the numbers for that. But There are publications out there that are pulled up on my computer. I just haven't read yet, and so there are different predictions and everything. But it's hard for me to say.
For sure. Yeah, I agree. That's why I ask you. I do agree. I don't think it's over with yet. But
But
again,
don't panic. That's the other thing. Don't panic.
right. But
Be prepared. Don't panic.
and so here in Kansas City, our lockdown is for 30 days. What's it like up there in Minnesota?
Yeah, so I mean, I actually don't recall how long the lockdown is. Again, I have decided to self-quarantine with my family here. We're on day 6 of that, and so after 14 days, our self-quarantine will be finished, but we will either continue that or practice social distance. And, if I need to go into work, it'll probably be like in the evening or something like that to do an experiment or two, something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, all the restaurants are closed. Schools are closed, I think, through the middle of April at least.
Right.
So yeah, it's we do have some drive-throughs that are open, and it's nice to. We've been getting some Uber deliveries and stuff to help support some of those local restaurants that are obviously not doing as well now. So
yeah, I was
do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking 2 days ago who owns and runs a restaurant here in town, and he had said he basically laid off his entire staff, and he has 3 people running the whole restaurant now. And it's out across all the industries across the whole country how that's affected. But okay, well, you know what? We'll see if, like we said earlier, if this gets worse before it gets better, maybe we'll do another one of these in a week or 2. But yeah, I'll let you get back to your day. Thanks for your time. People, you got questions? You can comment below. You can email me, dirksforcongress@me. But stay calm, my hands out. All right. See ya.
Okay.